Sometimes it seems like everything happens for a reason. Either the stoplight turns green when we're short on time, or the loud noises of the city quiet down right before we need to sleep. But major world events and personal crises never seem to unfold in neat and clean ways. That is, except for those rare occasions when all the pieces of the puzzle fit perfectly together, and when everything is too good to be true. It's these unbelievable coincidences that leave us with many questions around the world. So join the Hub as we go through these insane moments and ask whether there's a higher power, or if it's all just luck. And sure, you can just browse through the internet hoping you'll come across something interesting, or you could click the subscribe button to guarantee that you'll always see something out of this world. The luck of Frane Selak. Imagine an old train speeding along the countryside. Without warning, the locomotive jumps the tracks and rolls uncontrollably into the nearby river. A small passenger plane floats through the clouds, but then dips in the air and crashes. A bus bounds through a crowded road, then loses control. A car drives along a suburban street, and then, without warning, it explodes. This all looks like a trailer to some disaster movie, but it's all actually the story of Frane Selak's life. A Croatian man who lived to the ripe age of 84, this man survived a train crash in 1962 that claimed 17 lives. The following year, he was sucked out of a plane in freefall and survived after landing in a haystack. 3 years after that, he walked away from a bus accident, and soon after that, his car's motor exploded, spraying fire into the passenger seat, but leaving Selak unharmed. About 20 years later, he had to jump from his car when a collision knocked it off a cliff. And as a reward for surviving the plot of a Final Destination movie, fate decided to let him win the lottery. A newly minted millionaire, Selak gave his winnings to friends and family. Edwin Booth. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln by John Wilkes Booth is one of the most iconic and infamous moments in American history. As the man who committed the first assassination of a sitting president, Booth has been immortalized as one of history's villains. At the time, though, he was one of the most famous personalities around, and his acting family was equally notable, like the Barrymores or the Brolins. It was on a train platform several years before that the Booths and Lincolns would meet under less known circumstances. Abe's son, Robert Todd, was on his way home from college when he emerged from the train. Politely giving space to the other bystanders, Robert backed himself up against an idle train car. When the train started moving, he fell onto the gap between the train and the platform. Luckily for him, a distinguished figure from the crowd reached down and plucked Robert before the train could crush him. When Rob caught a glimpse of the hero, it was Edwin Booth. This whole situation is as crazy as, say, Tom Cruise rescuing Chelsea Clinton from an oncoming subway train. Booth later received a thank you letter from Lincoln himself, the man his own brother would later assassinate. Mesut Ozil and Enzo Ferrari. With billions of people on Earth and only a specific set of physical features to go around, people are bound to look alike from time to time. But have you ever seen two people whose resemblance is so uncanny they just have to be related? Well, Argentinian footballer Mesut Ozil's such a spot-on doppelganger for Italian automaker Enzo Ferrari that they might just well be the same person. At least if you consider reincarnation as a factor. Hear us out for a minute. Sure, their faces are structured nearly exactly alike. Yes, they have a very similar build. Of course, they work in fields that bring them to the attention of the public and require the skills of an extrovert. But also, consider the fact that when Ferrari died in 1988, it was the same year Ozil was born. If that's not the best evidence for some kind of spiritual transference, then we don't know what is. Having a massive meltdown over some celebrity lookalikes is nothing new for the internet. But with old-timey twins found for Keanu Reeves, John Travolta, and Matt Damon, we think this Ferrari and Ozil theory tops them all. WILMER McLean's War. The Lincolns weren't the only family tragically hit by the Civil War. Everyone had a stake in the conflict. For WILMER McLean, however, the war was repeatedly brought home. Operating his wife's plantation in Northern Virginia, McLean's property had the winding creek of Bull Run flowing through it. There, he witnessed one of the earliest battles of the conflict. In 1861, the Battle of Bull Run broke out right in front of his home, and the family barn was converted into a hospital and military prison which saw rebel fighters and Union prisoners share the same roof. When the second Battle of Bull Run broke out just a year later, WILMER decided to pack up for good and move his family to acquire a piece of land 120 miles southwest. He couldn't have imagined that his picturesque town of APPOMATTOX courthouse would be the site of the last battle of the war. When the battle ended and a truce between Grant and Lee needed to be signed, the officers asked the nearest bystander, WILMER, for a place the two could meet. McLean offered his living room and said, "The war began in my front yard and ended in my parlor." The Jim twins. Some twins have a secret language. Others have multi-million-dollar franchises like the Olsens. But not many have as interesting a story as Lewis and Springer. Known as the Jim twins, Jim Lewis and Jim Springer were 4 weeks old when they were separated from their birth mother. Adopted by different families, Lewis was told he had a twin brother at age 5, while Springer found out at age 8. Springer and his adopted parents thought his identical sibling had passed away, while Lewis had a difficult time comprehending there could be anyone else out there just like him. At age 39, however, he was faced with his exact double. Although they lived totally separate lives, it was hard to tell they weren't the same person. Both were 180 pounds, 6 feet tall, both had a dog named Troy, both had an ex-wife named Linda, and a current wife named Betty, and they both hid romantic notes to their respective wives around their respective houses. They both drove to work in light blue Chevrolets and coped with their part-time positions as sheriffs with moderate amounts of cigarettes and Miller Lite beer, and they dealt with anxiety through nail biting. As long as they don't start haunting secluded hotels, the creepy coincidences can stop there. The Wizard's Coat. The Wizard of Oz might be a classic for more than just its performances, songs, and style. Outside of Judy Garland and a few other exceptions, most of the supporting actors played multiple roles, and since this was a high-profile film, numerous revisions were undergone for the dialogue, the songs, and the costumes. With tons of characters and a massive cast, the visual style was seemingly changing on a daily basis. Yet one article of clothing was the exception. Frank Morgan, who played several parts, including the fortune teller at the beginning, Captain Marvel, and the wizard himself, got together with the director and designer to finalize his costume. They chose a tattered old coat, once stylish, but now faded. When Morgan looked inside the breast pocket, he found the name L. Frank Baum sewn into the coat. The production crew had gotten this item from a thrift store, and when they phoned the coat's original tailor and reached out to Baum's widow, they confirmed that the coat had belonged to the author of The Wizard of Oz himself. It took a blessing from the original wizard to help make this movie a classic. Tamerlane's Tomb. Tamerlane was a ruthless ruler who conquered lands all over Asia in the 1300s. As feared as he was merciless, he intended to create a larger empire than even his predecessors could have imagined. And since his predecessor was Genghis Khan, you have to imagine Tamerlane was a pretty tough guy. Through his 68-year-long life, which was an ancient age for a man back then, Tamerlane's reign led to the loss of 17 million lives. In keeping with his bloodlust, he had his tomb vested with a curse. When the tomb was uncovered in Uzbekistan in 1941, Stalin had it opened and requested that a facial sculpture be created from an analysis of Tamerlane's skull. He ordered the researchers to disregard the curse inscribed in the tomb's entrance, saying, "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble." Deeper in, it was written, "Whoever disturbs my tomb will unleash an invader more terrible than I." The elders warned that the curses take 3 days to enact, and true to form, Nazi forces began their invasion of Russia soon afterwards. As the Nazis lay siege to Stalingrad, Stalin became fearful of the evil unleashed in Uzbekistan and ordered that Tamerlane's remains be returned. It was soon after that date, in December 1942, that the Nazis surrendered and retreated. King Umberto's Double. In Italy, a less violent ruler still had his own complicated tale. King Umberto I was enjoying a meal at a nice restaurant in town, but he stopped when he noticed himself standing on the other end of the restaurant. To Umberto's surprise, he and the owner of the establishment looked exactly alike. When they got to talking, they realized that both shared the same birthday and birthplace, March 14, 1844, in Turin. When they discussed their home lives, they learned they both married their wives on the same day, and their significant others actually shared the name Margarita. To top it all off, when the owner told the king how long he'd been in business, they discovered that he was coronated on the same day the owner started. The coincidences don't stop there. The next day, the owner was shot in the street by an unknown assailant. The king was told this news just before he was hit by an assassin's bullet. While Umberto was a more complicated ruler with a penchant for unpopular policies, his father was known more for his philandering. Perhaps the restaurant owner was the king's illegitimate brother, and perhaps in sharing the same blood, they also shared the same fate. The Archduke's license plate. While Umberto's death came at a time of general instability in Italy, and Lincoln's death came at the end of a long war, Archduke Franz Ferdinand's was the start of one. A member of the Austro-Hungarian Empire's ruling family, the Archduke's assassination in 1914 sent Europe spiraling into World War I, and caused man-made not seen again until World War II. The weird thing was, the entire assassination seemed avoidable. The assassin Gavrilo Princip had attempted and failed to nab the Archduke earlier the same day, when an explosive was lobbed into the car, bounced off the exterior, and left the Archduke uninjured. Afterwards, Prince sulked at a nearby cafe when right in front of him, the same car was taking the Archduke now on an unplanned route. This was the assassin's second chance, and he took it. Even more curious than the odd situation that brought assassin and victim back together was the car's license plate, which read AIII-118. When you break that down, you could read it as Armistice 11-11-18. Strangely, November 11, 1918 is the date that the peace agreement was met, ending the fighting. It's as if the card led us to the start of and foretold the end of the Great War. Anne Parish and Jack Frost. Anne Parish was a popular author of novels and children's books in the first half of the 20th century. Fittingly, her tale of coincidence revolves around a book that formed up her own voice as a writer. Growing up, she loved Jack Frost and other stories. The fairy tales colored a lot of her experiences as a kid, and when she happened upon a copy of it in a Parisian bookstore, she just had to have it. Showing it to her husband, she marveled at how the worn cover and the pages inside took her back to a time when she was more innocent and carefree. She bought it for £1 and was even able to recount one of the tales pretty accurately from memory. When her husband took the book, he remarked that it shouldn't be that hard for her to remember this book anyway, she owned it. He opened the book, showed her the fly cover, and sure enough, inscribed on it was Anne Parish's name and New York address. When Anne left her childhood home to see the world years before, the book must have been sold too. Now well into adulthood, they both probably had some stories to tell, reunited on the other side of the Atlantic. It's no coincidence you watched this video all the way through. We hope you enjoyed, and we look forward to showing you some more fateful videos here at The Hub. Thanks for watching.